Hello everyone. I hope you are settling in comfortably, perhaps lying down with the lights dimmed, ready to drift away into a slow journey through time. Imagine, just for a moment, that the world you know today does not exist, and instead, there is a vast empire stretching across mountains, rivers, and seas, where the clamor of marketplaces and the distant calls of merchants echo endlessly. This is the Roman Empire, a land both magnificent and intimidating, where stone roads cut across endless landscapes, where cities rise with grand forums and temples, and yet, beyond those walls, stretches a countryside filled with uncertainty, adventure, and the hum of life in its rawest form. Before we wander too far, I am curious, where are you listening from, and what hour is it where you are? It is always fascinating to know who joins this quiet exploration, for even as we travel centuries back, we are connected in the present, momentarily sharing a single, slow rhythm of thought. To be a wanderer in the Roman Empire was to carry both freedom and vulnerability intertwined, to move through lands where one might be greeted with kindness or suspicion depending on the mood of the local populace, the season, or simply the whim of fate. The first thing that strikes such a traveler is the sheer scale of everything. The way the empire sprawls endlessly, a mosaic of villages, towns, military forts, and great cities, each with their own peculiar smells, sounds, and rules. Markets were alive with colors and smells, some appealing, others almost overwhelming. A mingling of dried herbs, fish, roasting meats, and the tang of fermented wines left in large clay amphorae. Merchants would call out their goods, from fine linens imported from the distant east, to crude pottery made in the small workshops along the Via Appia, to salted olives and grains stored in sacks that seemed to weigh a man down if he were foolish enough to carry more than necessary. Food, as it turns out, is one of the first ways a wanderer senses the rhythm of life here. Bread, coarse and heavy, often baked in communal ovens, was a staple, accompanied by legumes, cheese, and whatever fruits were in season. Figs, apples, or pomegranates that stained the fingers as they were eaten. At night, when travelers sought rest under the eaves of inns or in small taverns, the smell of wood smoke and roasting meat filled the air, blending with the sounds of conversation, laughter, and sometimes music played on lyres or flutes. There were foods that seemed foreign even to a seasoned traveler, dishes involving sauces thick with garum, a fermented fish paste, pungent and divisive in taste, yet cherished by locals for its flavor. Sometimes, the stranger would barter a coin or a small piece of cloth for a taste, curious if it was worth the reputation. Beyond food, the journey itself was an intricate dance with both danger and fascination. Roads, though constructed with remarkable precision, could be treacherous when rain turned stone slabs slippery, or when wild animals ventured too close to settlements. Caravans of pack animals trundled along, bells jingling, and every few miles, inns or roadside shelters provided places to rest. Here, one could meet fellow wanderers, soldiers returning from the frontiers, artisans seeking work in distant towns, and sometimes philosophers or priests who spoke in soft voices about the world beyond the empire, stories that hinted at lands even the Romans rarely touched. Travel was not merely a matter of moving from one city to another. It was a lesson in patience, observation, and sometimes cunning. One would notice the differences in architecture from province to province, the way local markets emphasized different goods, or how towns near rivers thrived with fishing while those on dry plains relied on grain and livestock. Entertainment varied as well. Some evenings were spent in amphitheaters, where the roar of crowds could lift spirits or chill the blood, witnessing gladiators in combat, or actors performing comedies and tragedies that reflected both politics and human folly. In smaller villages, entertainment was simpler. Storytelling by the fire, singing, dancing, or games of chance that required little more than stones and a patch of cleared earth. Sleep for a wanderer was often a mixture of relief and anxiety. Inns were crowded, sometimes damp, with straw-stuffed mattresses and thin blankets that offered little against the night chill. Travelers had to guard their belongings carefully, for theft was a constant threat, and rumors of highwaymen along isolated stretches of road were never far from conversation. Yet, there was a rhythm in this vulnerability, a sense of life lived fully in motion, where every encounter, friendly or hostile, added to the texture of experience. Even during the daytime, the wanderer's eyes and ears were constantly engaged. Birds and animals of every sort signaled the change of season. The chatter of children in villages echoed across fields. Craftsmen hammered iron, molded clay, and wove textiles in patterns that spoke of centuries of tradition. In such moments, one might pause to observe, perhaps helping a farmer carry a basket of grapes or a pot of water, or exchanging a brief conversation about the latest news from Rome itself, news that spread slowly but could stir excitement or concern far from the city. And yet, not all was tranquil observation. The roads could be arenas of tension and intrigue. Nobles and officials traveled with retinues that displayed wealth and authority, and the wanderer had to navigate carefully, showing respect yet maintaining distance, avoiding entanglements that could turn dangerous in an instant. Rumors of rebellions, bandits, or sudden inspections by the local magistrate traveled faster than letters, and a traveler had to adapt, learning when to linger, when to hide, and when to move forward with calculated courage. The life of a wanderer, while isolated in some ways, was also remarkably social. Stranger met stranger, stories were exchanged, and through this fluid network, news, gossip, and legends flowed, sometimes true, sometimes embroidered, always adding color to the journey. For those who moved quietly, observing, learning, the empire revealed itself not just as an expanse of stone and law, but as a living organism, complex and vibrant, capable of kindness and cruelty, wonder and monotony. As dusk fell, and the shadows lengthened across the tiled roofs of towns or the rolling fields, the traveler often reflected on the nature of this vast world. Each town offered a taste of life, each encounter a lesson, and each road a new chapter yet to be written. The horizon stretched endlessly, promising both comfort and challenge, and in that promise lay the heart of being a wanderer in the Roman Empire, forever moving, forever learning, and forever weaving oneself into the unseen tapestry of countless lives unfolding around them. As the wanderer moved on from the last village, the road seemed to stretch in a rhythm all its own, each step echoing softly against the well-laid stones of the Via Flaminia. Morning light filtered through the leaves of olive groves, casting shadows that danced with a quiet elegance across the path. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth, mingling with the faint perfume of wild herbs growing along the roadside, and somewhere in the distance, a shepherd's whistle carried across the hills, harmonizing with the bleating of goats and the lowing of cattle. These sounds were the gentle companions of the traveler, subtle reminders that life continued steadily, without haste, and yet with endless variations. Traveling through the countryside, the wanderer often encountered small clusters of people working the land. Farmers bent over the soil, turning it with hands roughened by years of toil, sowing seeds or harvesting vegetables, sometimes pausing to greet the traveler with a nod or a brief comment on the weather. It was striking how different each region could feel. Some villages seemed to pulse with activity, children darting between carts, women carrying baskets of freshly picked produce on their heads, while other areas were quiet, almost meditative, with smoke rising lazily from a single hearth and no sound except the gentle rustle of wind through the fields. These contrasts shaped the perception of the empire, a vast world that could be both lively and serene depending on where one wandered. Breakfast, in the simplest inns along the way, often consisted of bread dipped in wine, sometimes accompanied by cheese, olives, or a small portion of fruit. Occasionally, if the innkeeper was particularly generous, or if the wanderer offered a few coins, the meal might include eggs, honey, or a bit of cured meat. Water, fetched from nearby wells, was always a precious commodity, and travelers learned to drink cautiously, aware that contamination could lead to discomfort or illness, especially when journeying through less populated areas. It was these small attentions to daily routine, what to eat, when to rest, how to secure one's belongings, that defined the rhythm of the wanderer's existence, more so than any grand adventure or confrontation. The journey was punctuated by moments of curiosity and wonder. Passing through a small town with a bustling market, the traveler might linger near a potter's stall, watching hands move with fluid precision as clay was shaped into bowls and amphorae, or observe a blacksmith hammering iron until it glowed with heat, sparks leaping like tiny fireflies into the air. Children, fascinated by the stranger, sometimes followed at a cautious distance, giggling and whispering among themselves. Even in such simple interactions, there was a quiet thrill, the knowledge that for a moment, one was part of a life completely different from any home one had known. Entertainment along the road was as varied as the landscape. When passing larger towns, the wanderer could catch glimpses of performers balancing on ropes or juggling knives, their movements precise and practiced, designed to elicit gasps from an audience of townspeople who had seen such feats countless times but never without admiration. Occasionally, musicians traveled in groups, playing flutes, drums, or stringed instruments, drawing small crowds who clapped in rhythm, sometimes tossing coins to encourage them to continue. For a wanderer, these moments were fleeting but memorable glimpses into the daily joys and celebrations of those who had roots and families and responsibilities that the traveler had long left behind. Rest during the day was rare, but necessary. Shade was sought under olive trees, the branches rustling as if whispering secrets of the land, or in the archways of old stone bridges, where the cool air offered relief from the sun. In these pauses, the wanderer could reflect, listening to the distant hum of life around them. Carts creaking along roads, the clatter of horseshoes against stone, the low murmur of conversations carried across courtyards. Letters, often carried by merchants or messengers, were exchanged in town squares, and the traveler might catch fragments of stories, news of distant campaigns, changes in local leadership, or the arrival of exotic goods from far-flung provinces. Such tidbits were absorbed with quiet fascination, each one a reminder that the empire extended beyond what one could see, that countless lives were unfolding simultaneously across lands that seemed endless. Evening brought its own routines, taverns filled with a low murmur of conversation, the scent of roasting meat and freshly baked bread blending into the warm air. Patrons shared stories, some factual, some exaggerated for effect, speaking of encounters with wild animals, bandits, or mysterious travelers whose reputations had preceded them. The wanderer often joined quietly, listening, learning, sometimes contributing a word or two, careful not to reveal too much yet eager to be part of the collective rhythm of the night. Wine was shared sparingly, strong and slightly sour, yet it warmed the body and loosened tongues, encouraging laughter and the telling of tales long into the evening. In the stillness of the night, lying on a straw-stuffed mattress in a small inn, the wanderer could hear the creaking of the roof timbers, the distant bark of dogs, and the occasional murmur of guards patrolling the streets. Dreams often carried the residue of the day, the smell of bread, the colors of the market, the faces of children and travelers encountered along the road. And yet, despite the comfort of rest, there was always a sense of movement, of readiness to rise with the dawn and continue on a path that promised both discovery and challenge. Sometimes, the wanderer would encounter other travelers of different kinds. Priests carrying scrolls with sacred writings, merchants with wares wrapped tightly in cloth, soldiers moving in tight formations along the road, and philosophers who spoke in measured tones about the nature of life and duty. Each encounter added texture to the journey, revealing customs, superstitions, and beliefs that varied dramatically from one region to another. Observing rituals, overhearing debates, or witnessing local festivals offered a perspective that could not be gained from the walls of a single city. And so, the wanderer continued, moving steadily through the vastness of the empire, absorbing the subtleties of daily life, the flavor of food and wine, the rhythm of towns and villages, the distant echo of events unfolding beyond immediate perception. Every step was a lesson, every pause an opportunity to witness the human drama in its infinite variety. The roads themselves seemed alive, guiding the traveler with a quiet insistence, as though each stone and tree held memory of those who had come before, those who would follow, and the fleeting presence of the wanderer now passing silently through this tapestry of life. By the time the sun had climbed higher, painting the landscape in golden light, the wanderer found themselves approaching a settlement larger than any seen before, its walls rising firmly against the horizon, towers casting long shadows across the surrounding fields. The hum of life grew more pronounced as the traveler drew closer, the mingled sense of bread, smoke, and livestock merging into an invisible welcome mat, yet with a tension beneath it, as if the city itself scrutinized all who entered its gates. Here, the sounds of haggling and bargaining were sharper, more insistent, and the streets, paved unevenly with worn stones, teemed with citizens moving with purpose, some carrying bundles of goods, others exchanging whispers that seemed urgent and significant. The wanderer, as always, moved with a measured pace, careful to observe patterns, to note which streets were well-traveled and which led to quieter quarters where inns and taverns might be found. Inside the walls, life exhibited a rhythm unlike that of the countryside. Shops lined the main thoroughfares, displaying wares that ranged from the practical pottery, iron tools, woven cloth, to the exotic, spices from distant lands, delicate glassware, and dyes and colors so vivid they seemed impossible. Street performers added their voices to the chorus, balancing on precarious stilts or playing music that pulled attention in all directions at once. The wanderer paused at a stall where dried figs were stacked in pyramids, admiring their subtle sweetness, and overheard a merchant boasting of silk imported from Alexandria, shimmering like sunlight on water, and of rare oils that promised health and vitality. Food in a city was an adventure unto itself. Taverns offered larger portions than the small countryside inns, and ingredients were more varied. Lentils and beans were common, often spiced with herbs and sauces, while fresh fish arrived daily in baskets, still glimmering with scales like polished stone. Meat, too, could be obtained, though its quality varied. Pork and lamb were popular, often roasted over open flames or simmered in pots thick with herbs. Bread, more refined than in rural regions, sometimes had a subtle sweetness, enriched with honey or studded with dried fruit. For the wanderer, meals were both sustenance and entertainment, a chance to observe the behaviors of city dwellers, the hurried gestures of a baker kneading dough, the meticulous weighing of coins against goods by a vendor, the laughter and shouting of children weaving through the crowd as if part of some unspoken game. Entertainment took on new forms here. The amphitheater loomed at the edge of the city, a massive stone structure where the roar of crowds could be felt before it was heard. Inside, the spectacle was both mesmerizing and unsettling. Gladiators moving with precision and skill, their faces a mask of determination, and the audience reacting with a collective breath that seemed to vibrate the air itself. Theater performances were another draw, with actors in masks delivering stories of gods, heroes, and the follies of humans, their voices carrying across the stone seats to every corner, compelling attention, emotion, and reflection. Even the wanderer, accustomed to observing quietly, felt a subtle pull toward engagement, caught in the shared experience of countless spectators who were equally mesmerized. Yet, amid the excitement, caution remained paramount. Cities, while bustling, held hidden dangers. Thieves and pickpockets were a constant presence, blending seamlessly into crowds, waiting for a lapse in attention. Political tension, too, sometimes surfaced in subtle ways. The sharp glance of a magistrate passing by, the hurried whispers of townsfolk exchanging news about officials, or the arrival of soldiers whose armor gleamed in the sunlight, announcing authority without a single word. The wanderer, experienced in reading human behavior, knew to navigate these subtleties carefully, offering respect while avoiding confrontation, moving with the flow of the city rather than against it. Evenings were both a relief and a new challenge. The city's inns were crowded, rooms shared with strangers, each with their own peculiar habits and histories. The wanderer learned to place belongings strategically, to listen without being overheard, and to fall asleep amid the mixture of snoring, murmured conversations, and the occasional scuffle of restless guests. At times, street performers would continue late into the night, their music and acrobatics carrying faintly through open windows, blending into dreams that carried fragments of the day, sights, smells, conversations, and the constant, subtle tension of urban life. One particular evening, the wanderer found themselves in the company of a small group of merchants who had traveled from distant provinces, their tales as varied as their goods. They spoke of storms that destroyed crops in the north, of new trade routes opening in the east, and of a strange illness spreading through a nearby village, its details cloaked in rumor and fear. Listening carefully, the wanderer realized that such encounters, brief and seemingly incidental, provided knowledge that could shape decisions for days, influencing routes taken, markets visited, and even companions chosen. It was a constant balancing act, weighing curiosity against caution, desire against prudence. The wanderer also observed daily rituals of life that persisted even amid urban bustle. Children played simple games in courtyards, learning coordination and social skills simultaneously. Women carried water and prepared meals, sharing news and advice. Elders sat in shaded corners, recounting stories of past glories and defeats, their voices low yet compelling. The traveler, ever observant, noted subtle gestures. A hand extended in greeting, the fleeting frown at perceived disrespect, the careful attention to social hierarchy. All cues that conveyed unspoken rules of behavior, essential for survival and integration even for a transient visitor. Sleep eventually claimed the wanderer, but dreams were restless, weaving images of distant mountains, rivers glinting in sunlight, markets full of noise and color, and the constant movement that defined life in the Roman Empire. Each day promised new experiences, new lessons, and new decisions, as the road ahead stretched infinitely, inviting both caution and courage. The mundane and the extraordinary intertwined in the slow, deliberate rhythm of a life lived on the move. The next morning, the wanderer awoke to a soft drizzle that had settled over the city during the night, tiny droplets tapping rhythmically on rooftops and cobblestones, creating a gentle percussion that harmonized with the distant clatter of carts and the low murmur of early risers. Leaving the inn, the traveler adjusted a cloak to keep the chill and damp at bay, noting how the rain seemed to transform familiar streets into something both familiar and strange, with reflections glimmering on wet stones and the sense of earth, clay, and bread mingling in the cool air. There was a subtle thrill in such moments. The city, so often predictable in its routines, was now reshaped by weather, a reminder that even in a world governed by roads, walls, and laws, nature's whims could disrupt, transform, and inspire attention. Walking toward the market square, the wanderer observed merchants preparing their stalls with renewed energy, arranging goods carefully to avoid the damp. Baskets of grapes glistened under a thin veil of water, their deep purple hues contrasting with the muted tones of cloth and pottery. Spices in small clay jars released aromatic clouds, cumin, coriander, and cinnamon mingling with the more pungent garum, a fermented fish sauce whose sharp tang could be both appalling and alluring to the uninitiated. Fishmongers laid out their morning catch, the scales still glinting with the memory of the sea, while bakers carried trays of fresh bread from the ovens, the scent drifting far enough to draw patrons even before the first coin changed hands. The wanderer paused frequently, both to rest and to absorb details, noticing the subtle differences in accents, clothing, and demeanor among the people bustling about, each a clue to the complex social and geographic tapestry of the empire. Food, again, played a central role in the day's experiences. The traveler stopped at a small stall where a woman offered bowls of lentils simmered with herbs and bits of cured meat. She spoke little, but her eyes conveyed warmth, and the wanderer nodded in silent gratitude, savoring each bite slowly, noticing how the flavors carried the essence of the region. The dryness of the air, the richness of the soil, the careful selection of ingredients grown and tended nearby. Between bites, the traveler listened to conversations around the stall, overhearing snippets about harvests, local disputes, and news from distant provinces. fragments of life that would otherwise remain inaccessible. The roads outside the city presented an entirely different set of experiences. Leaving the crowded streets, the wanderer moved toward the rolling hills beyond, where stone walls marked property boundaries and fields stretched in neat rows, dotted with small farmhouses. Travel here demanded attentiveness. Rain-soaked paths could be treacherous, and animals, both domestic and wild, crossed unexpectedly. Travelers might encounter shepherds guiding flocks, often accompanied by dogs that barked but remained loyal to their masters, or laborers returning from fields, carrying the day's yield in baskets balanced carefully on their heads or shoulders. Every interaction, even brief, was a lesson in caution, observation, and social awareness, an essential skill for anyone moving through unfamiliar territories. Entertainment and distraction were quieter in rural areas, yet no less significant. Children played simple games with stones or sticks, inventing rules that changed with every passing hour. Women gathered at wells or along streams, chatting softly while drawing water or washing clothes, their voices carrying faint melodies that suggested folk songs or improvisations to pass time. The wanderer sometimes paused to watch, quietly noting rhythms, gestures, and patterns, absorbing the subtle culture of daily life, understanding that the empire was not solely defined by its grand monuments or bustling cities, but also by the steady, uncelebrated labor and creative impulses of ordinary people. Encounters along these roads were unpredictable. Sometimes another traveler appeared, a soldier on leave, a merchant moving between provinces, a priest carrying scrolls or religious artifacts. Conversations, when they occurred, were brief but revealing. One might hear of a village suffering a poor harvest, or a rumor of a new law passed in Rome that could affect trade in the region, or a story of a mysterious figure spotted on the road, whose origins and intentions were unclear. Such encounters, often fleeting, carried weight. A single warning or piece of information could alter plans, suggest caution, or simply provide a fascinating insight into human behavior and the spread of news. Evenings in rural inns or way stations carried their own rhythm. Fires were lit early, and the smell of roasting meat and bread filled rooms and courtyards. Patrons gathered, some to share stories, others to listen quietly, and the wanderer learned to participate just enough to remain engaged but not exposed. Wine, strong and often slightly sour, encouraged conversation and laughter, while the flickering light of torches created shadows that danced across walls, adding a sense of intimacy and theatricality to otherwise ordinary evenings. Tales of bandits, strange occurrences in nearby forests, and occasional heroic exploits of locals blended seamlessly with more mundane news of harvests, weather, and daily routines, creating a tapestry of information and entertainment that sustained travelers and residents alike. Sleep followed naturally, though often with interruptions. Animals in stables made noise, travelers in nearby rooms shuffled about, and the occasional storm added its percussion to the nocturnal soundtrack. Dreams were rich with fragments of the day, the smell of bread, the glint of sunlight on rain-soaked leaves, the sound of voices both familiar and strange. Even in slumber, the wanderer absorbed the rhythm of the world around them, a subtle, continuous learning that shaped perception, understanding, and anticipation for the next day. In moments of quiet reflection, the traveler considered the interconnectedness of the empire. Roads that stretched for hundreds of miles connected distant provinces, enabling the flow of goods, information, and culture. Soldiers patrolled borders, yet much of the empire remained remarkably fluid, with people moving, trading, and sharing knowledge across regions that would otherwise seem isolated. Each village, town, and city contributed to a vast, living organism, and the wanderer, though transient, was a participant in this grand system, observing, learning, and moving in rhythm with countless lives unfolding simultaneously across the empire. By the time night fell once again, the wanderer found themselves gazing at the stars above a quiet field, the city and its sounds now far behind. Crickets chirped, leaves rustled softly in the breeze, and the distant murmur of a stream created a natural lullaby. In these moments, there was both serenity and anticipation, a sense that the road would continue to offer new lessons, new encounters, and new ways of understanding a world that was vast, intricate, and endlessly fascinating. As dawn broke, the wanderer found themselves once again on the road, the early light filtering through mist that hovered over low hills and scattered groves. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of wet earth and the faint aroma of baked bread from distant farms. A soft wind rustled the leaves, a gentle percussion that accompanied each step, reminding the traveler of the quiet, almost meditative rhythm of movement. Roads here were less crowded, yet the subtle signs of human life remained: fences marking property, distant chimneys puffing smoke, and the occasional figure moving slowly along a field or carrying water from a nearby stream. The wanderer paused frequently, not from fatigue alone, but to observe patterns, gestures, and small details that revealed the character of the people inhabiting these lands, their habits, and their resilience. Meals along the way were practical yet fascinating, revealing the ingenuity and resourcefulness of those who prepared them. Breakfast often consisted of coarse bread dipped in diluted wine or water, accompanied by cheese or nuts gathered from surrounding trees. Occasionally, the traveler would encounter a farmer preparing porridge with grains harvested days before, thickened with milk and sweetened with honey if available. Each bite told a story: the climate, the soil, the care taken in cultivation, and the wanderer absorbed these subtle details, understanding that even the simplest meal was a reflection of environment, culture, and the hard labor of those who produced it. Passing through small hamlets, the wanderer noticed local customs, subtle and rich in meaning. Children played in the open courtyards, inventing games with sticks, stones, and scraps of cloth, learning cooperation, strategy, and social skill in ways adults rarely observed. Women gathered at wells or near small communal ovens, exchanging advice about food, childcare, and remedies for minor ailments. Elders sat quietly, often in shaded corners, recounting local history, legends, or personal experiences, their voices low yet compelling. The traveler, listening without intrusion, felt a deep appreciation for the layers of knowledge and tradition carried in these simple interactions, understanding that the empire's identity was as much in these moments as in grand cities or towering monuments. Encounters on the road were unpredictable. A traveling merchant might pass, carrying bolts of cloth or clay pots, offering brief conversation and occasional gossip about distant towns, bandit activity, or imperial decrees. Soldiers on patrol or returning from duty might nod curtly, their presence a reminder of authority, discipline, and the underlying tension in an empire built on both law and force. Occasionally, wandering priests appeared, their garments simple yet distinct, carrying sacred texts and murmuring prayers. Each encounter demanded careful observation, respectful engagement, and sometimes subtle negotiation, as the wanderer had to balance curiosity with caution, ensuring that interactions did not lead to misunderstanding or danger. Entertainment along the way remained modest yet meaningful. In one village, the wanderer stumbled upon a small gathering around a fire, villagers singing softly, accompanied by a rudimentary string instrument played by an elder. The melody was haunting, drawing the traveler closer, and for a moment, all concerns of travel, weather, or fatigue dissolved into the shared rhythm of human expression. Stories were exchanged, some factual, some embellished, about legendary travelers, heroic deeds, and peculiar events, such as a wild animal spotted unusually close to the village or an inexplicable phenomenon in the sky. Even in remote locations, these moments of shared attention and amusement connected people across time and space, reinforcing the communal nature of existence. Food during midday was often procured from small roadside stalls or friendly households. Dried fruits, nuts, and cheeses were common, supplemented occasionally by roasted or boiled vegetables. Water was fetched from wells or streams, with care to ensure cleanliness, and sometimes wine diluted with water offered a more potent refreshment for those willing to risk its strength. Observing these practices, the wanderer noted the ingenuity with which people maximized limited resources, combining nutrition with taste, preservation with practicality. Meals became a subtle education, revealing social norms, seasonal cycles, and regional differences in flavor, preparation, and presentation. As the day progressed, the wanderer often took moments to rest in shaded areas, under trees or beside streams. Here, time seemed to slow, allowing contemplation and quiet observation. Birds called from branches, insects buzzed around wildflowers, and the distant sound of carts, animals, and human voices formed a layered background of life. In these pauses, the traveler reflected on both the physical journey and the social journey, the ways in which people navigated hierarchy, shared resources, and expressed cultural identity through gestures, speech, and ritual. Each observation added depth to understanding, painting a vivid portrait of an empire alive with motion, subtlety, and complexity. Evening brought a shift in the atmosphere. Inns and small taverns offered warmth and nourishment, and the wanderer often found company in fellow travelers or locals willing to share a fire, a story, or a meal. Conversation flowed, sometimes cautiously, as information carried weight, but often with warmth and camaraderie, a temporary suspension of the social distance maintained during the day. The smell of roasting meat, the flicker of torchlight, and the gentle clatter of dishes created a sense of comfort and continuity, linking the traveler to a larger human rhythm that spanned regions and generations. Nightfall carried its own rituals. Fires burned low, shadows stretched across rooms, and the wanderer listened to the subtle nocturnal sounds of animals, wind, and distant voices. Sleep was welcomed, though often light, as awareness of surroundings remained crucial. Dreams were colored by the day's experiences. The smell of bread, the laughter of children, the distant toll of a bell calling worshippers, the rhythmic movement of carts along uneven stones. Even in rest, the wanderer was entwined with the life of the empire, absorbing lessons, sensations, and patterns that would shape the next day's decisions and observations. By midnight, the traveler often contemplated the vastness of the Roman world. Roads extending for hundreds of miles connected distant provinces, enabling trade, communication, and cultural exchange. Each town, village, and city contributed to the larger organism, a network of lives constantly in motion. The wanderer, though a transient presence, was both observer and participant, witnessing the interconnectedness of daily labor, ritual, celebration, and caution. The empire's scale was matched by the depth of detail in ordinary life, from the preparation of food to the rhythm of conversation, the strategies for safe travel, and the unspoken agreements that governed interaction across regions. The morning air was crisp, carrying a slight tang of the sea from a distant coast, although the wanderer had yet to reach the shoreline. Mist hung low in the valleys, curling around the bases of hills and clinging to the edges of the forest, as if the world itself were reluctant to reveal its full contours. The road stretched ahead, lined with gnarled trees and the occasional stone marker indicating distance to the next settlement. Every step was deliberate, measured against the uncertainty of what lay beyond the bend. An unexpected village, a merchant caravan, or perhaps the shadow of danger. Being a wanderer required constant attention, a blend of curiosity and caution, a willingness to engage and withdraw in equal measure. Along the route, the traveler encountered fields where laborers were hard at work, bending to the earth with tools honed over years of use. Some were sowing grain, their hands blackened with soil, while others harvested vegetables and herbs, placing them carefully into baskets that balanced precariously on heads or shoulders. Children followed, helping in small ways, learning the rhythms of labor and the unspoken rules of patience, cooperation, and responsibility. The wanderer observed quietly, noting gestures, expressions, and methods, understanding that these small actions were the invisible threads that held communities together, that determined the success of crops, the security of families, and the continuity of traditions across generations. Food remained a constant companion and lesson. At midday, the traveler often sought out local households willing to share simple fare. Bread, fresh from the oven or baked the previous day, was accompanied by lentils or barley porridge, sometimes enriched with small pieces of meat or cheese. Fruit, depending on the season, offered both sustenance and a fleeting pleasure, while herbs and oils added subtle complexity to otherwise plain dishes. Observing how meals were prepared and consumed provided insight not only into taste and nutrition but also into social structure, hospitality, and ritual. Who served first, how offerings were divided, and which foods were considered appropriate for children, elders, or guests. Each bite carried a story, and the traveler savored both the flavor and the context, aware that understanding these nuances was part of understanding the empire itself. Travel was not without its dangers. Bandits lurked along isolated stretches, their presence whispered about in taverns and markets, their tactics varying from ambush to cunning deception. Wild animals sometimes crossed paths unexpectedly, foxes and wolves darting across fields or forests, while larger predators prowled further from populated areas. The wanderer learned to read signs of movement, to notice disturbed grass, broken twigs, or distant sounds that might signal risk. Caution was instinctual, awareness was survival. Yet, amid these threats, there was exhilaration, a sense that life, in its unpredictability, was both fragile and vivid, a reminder that every decision, every step, carried weight. Evenings brought respite and community. Small inns offered warmth, food, and companionship, though rooms were often shared with strangers whose habits were unfamiliar. Fires were tended, meat roasted, and wine poured sparingly. Patrons exchanged stories, news of harvests, sightings of unusual travelers, rumors of officials visiting distant provinces, and tales of miraculous events or unusual phenomena. The wanderer listened carefully, discerning which accounts were factual, which exaggerated, and which purely imaginative, yet all added texture to the understanding of the empire, its people, and its endless variety. Occasionally, the traveler found themselves drawn into local festivals or rituals. A village might celebrate a harvest with music, dancing, and communal meals, the air thick with laughter and the scent of roasting grain and meat. Elders led dances, children attempted to imitate intricate steps, and villagers exchanged stories of past triumphs and misfortunes. The wanderer, though an outsider, participated in small ways, clapping along with the rhythm, observing the rituals, or sharing a brief story from the road. These moments, though brief, created a sense of belonging, a fleeting connection to the continuity of human experience that stretched far beyond any single town or province. Night brought reflection and introspection. Lying on a straw-stuffed mattress, the wanderer listened to the quiet sounds of the inn, the soft breathing of fellow travelers, the distant bark of dogs, the occasional clatter of utensils, or the murmur of a conversation. Dreams were rich with the day's impressions. The glow of firelight on stone walls, the texture of bread crust, the laughter of children chasing each other through courtyards, the glint of coins exchanged in the marketplace, and the subtle, persistent sense of movement, always movement, along the roads and through life itself. Each dream reinforced lessons learned, observations made, and the understanding that the empire, in its vastness and complexity, could be explored through both action and reflection. The wanderer also paid attention to the small rhythms of life often unnoticed by those rooted in a single place. The way smoke drifted from chimneys, indicating activity within, the direction of wind that suggested changes in weather, the subtle shifts in animal behavior that hinted at predators or foraging patterns. Even the changing patterns of sunlight, the angle of shadows on walls and roads, provided cues for timing travel, seeking shade, or finding water. These observations, seemingly minor, were essential for navigating the empire safely and efficiently, ensuring that each day's journey was both productive and secure. As the night deepened, and the world outside settled into quiet, the wanderer reflected on the continuous flow of life witnessed during the day. Roads, towns, fields, and forests all held their own rhythms, interconnected in a vast network that stretched across the empire. People moved, labored, celebrated, worried, and rested, their lives intertwined in ways both visible and subtle. The traveler, though passing through, became a part of this rhythm, a transient note in a grand composition that extended beyond imagination, across centuries, and into the intricate web of human existence. By the end of the 6th day on this stretch of road, the wanderer had become attuned not only to the physical landscape, but also to the social, cultural, and emotional patterns that governed life. Every encounter, every meal, every pause for rest contributed to a richer understanding of the empire, its people, and the delicate balance between movement and observation, curiosity and caution. The journey continued, endless in scope, with each step offering new lessons, new stories, and new ways of perceiving a world that was as beautiful as it was unpredictable, as comforting as it was demanding, and always, always alive. As the sun rose over distant hills, casting long, golden fingers across the fields, the wanderer found themselves on a stretch of road lined with dense forest, the trees stretching skyward as if to touch the heavens, their leaves whispering secrets to one another in the gentle morning breeze. Birds called from the canopy, their songs weaving a delicate tapestry of sound that mingled with the rustle of small animals in underbrush and the faint clatter of hoofbeats from a distant herd. Here, away from bustling towns and familiar villages, the world seemed to breathe with a slower, more deliberate rhythm, each moment laden with quiet possibility and subtle danger alike. Along this forested path, the wanderer encountered other travelers whose presence hinted at stories untold. A merchant with a heavily laden cart paused briefly, exchanging polite greetings while speaking of distant markets, rare spices, and the difficulty of transporting fragile goods over long distances. A priest, walking with slow, deliberate steps, muttered prayers under their breath, carrying a small scroll wrapped in protective cloth, its contents sacred and secretive. Even a lone soldier, traveling between garrisons, appeared on the road, their armor reflecting sunlight in glimmers that danced across the undergrowth. Each encounter, fleeting as it might be, offered insight into the broader tapestry of life, reminding the traveler that every individual carried a story, a purpose, and a connection to places and events far beyond the immediate path. Meals in these isolated stretches were simple yet sustaining, often prepared by the traveler themselves or procured from small homesteads along the way. Bread, sometimes baked the day before, was paired with cheese or dried fruit, while water from streams or wells offered refreshment, occasionally augmented by wine diluted with water. Each meal became a ritual of observation as much as sustenance. The careful selection of food, the mindful consumption, and the attention to surroundings all contributed to survival and awareness. Herbs and wild edibles, gathered cautiously, added flavor and variety, and sometimes a touch of excitement when a new plant was identified or a local shared a recipe unknown in other regions. As the day progressed, signs of civilization began to mingle with the untamed landscape. Small hamlets appeared intermittently, clusters of stone or timber buildings forming centers of community life. Children played games that seemed universal yet unique, their laughter echoing across courtyards and gardens, while women worked methodically, preparing food, mending garments, or tending animals. Elders offered quiet counsel and stories to anyone willing to listen, their words steeped in local history and practical wisdom. Markets, though modest, offered opportunities to trade, observe, and learn. The prices of goods, the quality of craftsmanship, and even the nuances of social interaction in these settings provided the wanderer with rich context for understanding the broader empire. Yet danger remained an ever-present companion. The forest was home to wild animals, foxes, wolves, and the occasional bear that might cross the road unexpectedly. Bandits and opportunistic thieves were rumored to patrol remote stretches, exploiting the isolation to catch travelers off guard. The wanderer learned to read subtle cues in the environment. Broken branches, disturbed soil, distant sounds, or unusual animal behavior could all indicate the presence of others. Awareness was survival, and even a brief lapse in attention could have consequences. And yet, this tension lent the journey a quiet thrill, a constant reminder that life on the road was alive with unpredictability, requiring both vigilance and adaptability. Entertainment in this context became intimate and spontaneous. A group of villagers might gather around a fire to share music, stories, or dances, their performances modest yet rich with cultural significance. The wanderer observed, sometimes participating with subtle gestures, clapping along, humming quietly, or sharing a brief anecdote from the road. These moments reinforced connection, trust, and the continuity of human expression, reminding the traveler that even in isolated areas, culture and tradition thrived, shaping identity and community cohesion. Food and preparation continued to reveal the ingenuity of local people. Roasted meats over open flames, porridge thickened with milk and honey, preserved vegetables and fruits. Each method reflected centuries of accumulated knowledge, adapted to local climate, available resources, and the necessity of sustenance over luxury. Observing these methods, the wanderer not only learned practical skills but also absorbed an understanding of priorities, resourcefulness, and subtle social hierarchies embedded in the preparation and sharing of meals. Evenings in the forested stretches brought both solace and reflection. Fires burned steadily, casting flickering shadows that merged with the natural dimming of light. The sound of nocturnal animals, a distant howl, the rustle of leaves, the croak of frogs near streams, created a living soundtrack that intertwined with the wanderer's thoughts. Sleep was light, often interrupted by the movement of other travelers, animals, or weather, yet dreams were rich, weaving together fragments of observation, stories overheard, and the intricate patterns of human and natural life encountered during the day. Occasionally, unusual events punctuated the monotony of travel. A sudden storm could turn a simple path into a slippery, treacherous ordeal, forcing the wanderer to improvise shelter or seek the aid of locals. Unfamiliar travelers might appear, bringing tales of distant conflicts, strange phenomena, or impending festivals. One afternoon, a troupe of performers passed through, their colorful garments and acrobatics attracting curious villagers and momentarily distracting the wanderer from the road's challenges. These interruptions, though brief, reinforced the unpredictability of life as a traveler, offering both amusement and insight into the diversity of human experience. By nightfall, the wanderer had gained both distance and perspective. The forest, though daunting, had provided opportunities to observe subtle patterns, understand regional differences, and witness the interplay between human settlement and the untamed environment. Each day of travel added layers of knowledge, sharpening observation, intuition, and social understanding. Roads, inns, fields, and villages were no longer merely physical spaces but living entities, each with rhythms, characters, and stories that shaped the traveler's perception and response. The following morning arrived with a soft haze. The sunlight diffused into a gentle glow that made even familiar paths appear foreign and new. The wanderer moved along a narrow trail flanked by dense undergrowth, the occasional flash of color from wildflowers drawing attention briefly before the road demanded focus once more. Every step seemed measured, balancing the necessity of forward movement with the desire to observe, absorb, and interpret the subtle signs of the environment. Fallen leaves, the shape of distant hills, the distant sound of running water that might indicate a stream or a spring, life-giving resources essential for the weary traveler. In one small clearing, the wanderer encountered a group of villagers tending to their fields, preparing for the harvest. They worked methodically, hands moving with practiced precision, exchanging words in low tones that conveyed information efficiently yet respectfully. Children carried small loads or chased each other with laughter, their play both learning and entertainment intertwined. The traveler paused briefly to watch, noticing the subtle dynamics. The elders overseeing work, instructing children, or sharing advice on the optimal way to sow or gather crops. Every gesture, every arrangement of labor, reflected an intimate knowledge of the land and its demands, an accumulated wisdom passed through generations, quietly shaping the rhythms of daily life. Food, again, revealed layers of culture and adaptation. The wanderer sampled a simple meal provided by a kindly family. Bread, thick and slightly coarse, paired with a spread of fresh cheese and drizzled with honey, accompanied by a small bowl of boiled lentils seasoned with herbs grown in the village garden. The flavors were straightforward yet satisfying, each bite carrying both nourishment and the intangible essence of the region, the soil, the climate, and the hands that had prepared it. Such meals were moments of connection, a temporary integration into the daily lives of those encountered, offering insight into local customs, tastes, and values. As the day progressed, the wanderer moved toward a larger town known for its modest amphitheater and bustling marketplace. The streets became noisier, filled with merchants calling out wares, children darting through crowds, and the occasional street performer balancing precariously on stilts or strumming a stringed instrument. The sense of bread, roasting meat, herbs, and smoke mingled into a thick, almost tangible atmosphere, overwhelming yet invigorating. The traveler navigated carefully, mindful of pickpockets and the subtle hierarchies evident in the way people moved and interacted. Even here, in the heart of human activity, observation remained paramount. Gestures, tones, and patterns revealed more than words alone. Unusual encounters punctuated the journey. A mysterious traveler arrived in town, cloaked and hooded, speaking in fragmented phrases that hinted at distant provinces and unknown events. Villagers speculated in hushed tones about their origin, some suggesting a soldier returning from a far-flung campaign, others whispering of a scholar seeking ancient texts. The wanderer, ever attentive, observed from a distance, noting not only the stranger's attire and speech but also the reactions of those around them. Curiosity, suspicion, fascination, and fear intermingling in complex, unspoken ways. Even brief interactions offered lessons in human behavior, signaling the delicate balance between trust and caution required in an empire as vast and diverse as this one. Evening brought a shift in energy. Taverns and inns filled with travelers sharing news, exchanging goods, and recounting stories from distant lands. Fires were tended carefully, the aroma of cooking meat and simmering vegetables filling rooms and hallways. Patrons laughed, argued, or shared quiet moments of reflection, and the wanderer joined subtly, listening, learning, and occasionally contributing with measured words that avoided drawing unwanted attention. Music and song emerged naturally, sometimes led by local performers, sometimes by travelers seeking to entertain or earn a small coin. These cultural expressions, though simple, revealed much about identity, regional pride, and the shared need for connection amid constant movement. Night in the town was alive with quiet intrigue. Shadows stretched across alleyways, and the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer echoed intermittently. Stories circulated of recent bandit activity along the roads, strange lights seen in forests at dusk, and odd occurrences in nearby villages. The wanderer absorbed these tales, filtering rumor from plausible event, recognizing that information, even when uncertain, could influence decisions about travel, rest, and interaction. Awareness remained as critical at night as during the day, and sleep, though welcomed, was approached with mindfulness, attuned to sounds, movement, and the subtle cues of an environment alive with both opportunity and risk. In moments of solitude, the traveler reflected on the vastness of human life within the empire. Roads stretched endlessly, linking provinces, villages, and cities, while each settlement maintained its own rhythm, character, and customs. People moved, labored, celebrated, and rested, each action contributing to the larger fabric of society. The wanderer, transient yet attentive, became a participant in this vast network, observing and integrating into the ebb and flow of human experience without ever truly belonging, yet leaving subtle traces of their presence in the fleeting interactions, gestures, and shared meals along the way. Dreams, when they came, were layered with fragments of the day. The glow of firelight on cobblestone streets, the laughter of children, the smell of baking bread, the distant call of a herder tending flocks. They merged with memories of previous travels, the texture of clothing, the sharp taste of cheese and honey, and the ever-present awareness of movement, strategy, and observation. Even in sleep, the traveler absorbed lessons about survival, culture, and human behavior, understanding that life on the road was as much an internal journey of perception and learning as it was a physical journey across landscapes and settlements. By midnight, as quiet settled over the town and the occasional traveler passed along dimly lit streets, the wanderer reflected on the interconnectedness of experience. Every step along the road, every meal shared, every story overheard contributed to a deeper understanding of the empire. Life, whether in bustling marketplaces, remote villages, or forested trails, was rich with nuance, pattern, and subtle drama. The traveler, though fleeting in presence, was woven into this vast tapestry, moving forward with awareness, curiosity, and a sense of participation in a world both immense and intimately detailed, ever ready for the next day's discoveries and challenges. The morning arrived with an almost imperceptible chill, the air carrying a hint of damp earth and distant smoke, a reminder that life, labor, and fire persisted even before the sun had fully risen. The wanderer adjusted the cloak to ward off the cold, feeling the familiar weight of travel, yet embracing it as both companion and guide. Roads stretched ahead, winding through hills and valleys, occasionally opening into meadows where wildflowers swayed lazily in the breeze. Every step demanded attention. One misstep could lead to twisted ankles on uneven ground, or a missed sign of a nearby danger. But each step also offered observation, delight, and the subtle thrill of discovery that accompanied life constantly in motion. Along these routes, the traveler encountered unusual gatherings. A small festival was underway in a secluded village, celebrating a seasonal harvest. Stalls offered honey cakes, roasted nuts, and small quantities of wine, while villagers adorned themselves with garlands of leaves and flowers, chanting in rhythmic unison. Music rose from stringed instruments, drums, and the occasional flute, creating a layered sound that wove through the air, drawing children into dance and encouraging adults to join in familiar rituals. The wanderer watched with fascination, noting gestures, timing, and unspoken rules. Who led, who followed, how offerings were presented to ensure good fortune, and how laughter and joy intertwined seamlessly with reverence and respect for tradition. Each nuance carried lessons about communal identity, hierarchy, and the subtle codes governing social interaction. Food remained central to every experience, whether ordinary or celebratory. The festival offered delicacies unknown on the road: honey-soaked bread, roasted fruits, and spiced meats that filled the air with intoxicating aroma. Observing the preparation was as instructive as tasting the final product. Techniques honed over years, combinations of flavors reflecting local resources, and an understanding of sustenance balanced with ritual and enjoyment. Eating here was not mere survival. It was participation, a subtle immersion into the rhythms, beliefs, and pleasures of a community that had thrived for generations. Travel between villages offered its own lessons. Paths through forests and over hills were punctuated by occasional clearings where animals grazed or birds nested, and signs of previous travelers. A discarded coin, a carved mark on a tree, a broken branch, hinted at movement and presence. The wanderer learned to interpret these cues, distinguishing casual evidence from subtle warnings and adjusting routes, speed, and behavior accordingly. Awareness was both instinct and skill, honed daily, ensuring that the journey continued smoothly while minimizing risk. Encounters with people remained varied and instructive. A merchant caravan passed, laden with clay pots, textiles, and dried foods from distant provinces. Their languages intermingled, a fluid blend of regional accents and dialects, creating a living demonstration of the empire's reach and diversity. Conversations, sometimes brief, sometimes extended, offered insight into trade routes, provincial customs, and political shifts, while stories about bandit attacks or unusual natural occurrences illustrated both practical concerns and the enduring human fascination with the mysterious and the perilous. As the day progressed, the wanderer passed through a town notable for its modest amphitheater and a collection of small workshops where craftsmen shaped metal, clay, and wood into functional and decorative objects. Observing artisans at work revealed both skill and social structure. Apprentices learned from masters, tools were carefully maintained, and materials were allocated according to hierarchy and demand. The hum of hammers, the scent of heated metal, and the sight of hands skilled through repetition combined to create a sensory education in labor, craft, and ingenuity, a lesson in human adaptation and excellence in mundane pursuits. Evening brought the traveler to a small tavern where the fire glowed warmly against the chill. Patrons gathered, recounting the day's events, offering news of distant towns, or sharing tales of strange occurrences. A river that changed course suddenly, a traveler seen carrying what appeared to be a magical artifact, or a herd of cattle that vanished inexplicably overnight. The wanderer listened carefully, aware that fact and fiction often intertwined, yet each story illuminated local concerns, values, and imagination. Here, humor and superstition existed side by side, revealing a nuanced understanding of human psychology and communal bonding. Night travel, though rare, revealed subtler elements of life along the road. Moonlight cast silver paths across cobblestones, shadows stretched and shifted with the flicker of torchlight, and sounds of nocturnal animals. Owls, foxes, and occasional wolves provided both atmosphere and caution. Sleep, when finally welcomed, was light, broken by the occasional movement of fellow travelers or the whisper of wind through shutters and trees. Dreams interlaced observation, memory, and anticipation. The colors of festivals, the scent of bread, the glimmer of coins, and the whisper of rumors, all blending into a rich tapestry of awareness and reflection that prepared the wanderer for the next day. As the night deepened, the traveler contemplated the network of roads, villages, and towns that connected the empire. Each settlement maintained its own rhythm, traditions, and methods of survival, yet all were linked through commerce, communication, and shared experience. Observing patterns of labor, play, and ritual revealed the subtle harmony of a world vast in scale, yet intricately detailed in human interaction. The wanderer, though transient, became a participant, a silent observer whose presence was felt in fleeting interactions, shared meals, and quiet attention. By midnight, as stars shimmered above and distant fires glowed softly, the wanderer felt both part of and apart from the living world. The roads, the settlements, the forests, and the people all existed in a continuous flow of activity, yet each day revealed new details, unexpected encounters, and lessons in observation, patience, and human behavior. Life on the road was a blend of survival, curiosity, and subtle engagement, an endless process of learning and adaptation, punctuated by moments of beauty, danger, humor, and reflection, preparing the traveler for the unfolding journey yet to come. Dawn broke with a muted glow, the horizon tinged in pale amber that slowly stretched across rolling hills, casting long, soft shadows over the road ahead. The wanderer moved with a practiced rhythm, cloak brushing against the edge of the path, boots stirring faint clouds of dust that lingered briefly before settling. The air carried both freshness and a faint aroma of baked goods from a distant village, mingling with the earthy scent of damp soil and wildflowers. Every step demanded attention. The slightest misjudgment could result in twisted ankles, stray encounters with animals, or an unforeseen meeting with people whose intentions were unclear. Yet the road also offered discovery. Hidden clearings, unusual plant growths, and the faint traces of travelers who had passed hours, days, or even weeks before, leaving subtle markers that spoke volumes to those attentive enough to notice. In one small glade, the wanderer observed a scene that captured the essence of human ingenuity and adaptation. Villagers were preparing for a local festival, their tasks divided efficiently among adults and children. Women wove garlands of fresh flowers and herbs, placing them carefully along thresholds and atop small shrines to mark the changing season, while men arranged wooden stalls for the sale of simple goods, dried fruits, cheese, small textiles, and locally produced wine. Children scurried between these tasks, laughing as they delivered messages or fetched water, learning the delicate balance between responsibility and play, understanding the rhythms of labor and leisure without instruction. The wanderer paused, noting how each role, no matter how small, contributed to the harmony of the gathering, revealing a society where efficiency, celebration, and cultural continuity coexisted seamlessly. Food continued to offer lessons in both survival and culture. The traveler was invited to share a meal, a rustic preparation of roasted vegetables, grains cooked in small clay pots, and small portions of preserved meat. Each ingredient reflected local availability and seasonal variation, with preparation methods honed over generations to maximize flavor, nutrition, and shelf life. Honey, gathered from nearby hives, provided both sweetness and a touch of luxury. Observing these practices offered insight into community knowledge, which foods were shared, which were reserved for special occasions, and how meals structured social interaction, from hierarchy to hospitality, revealing much about both culture and human ingenuity. Travel along the road revealed patterns of life that were subtle yet profound. A traveling merchant passed by, their cart creaking under the weight of goods from distant regions, olive oil, fine cloth, pottery, and offered brief news about far-off cities, political shifts, and rumors of bandit activity. Soldiers occasionally appeared, patrolling routes or returning from duties, their presence a reminder of authority, discipline, and potential danger. Priests moved quietly, their garments simple yet distinct, murmuring prayers and carrying small, sacred items. Each encounter required a careful blend of curiosity, respect, and caution, as even a brief interaction could provide valuable knowledge or pose unexpected risk. As midday approached, the wanderer took advantage of a shaded area beside a slow-moving stream to rest. Birds called from the canopy, insects hummed softly among wildflowers, and the occasional rustle of small mammals provided a dynamic backdrop. Meals here were often self-prepared. Flatbread warmed over a fire, cheese, foraged berries, and water from the stream filtered through cloth. Every preparation was deliberate, and even eating became a lesson in awareness, monitoring the environment, appreciating the flavors, and understanding how sustenance intertwined with observation, patience, and the unspoken rules of travel. Unpredictable events punctuated the journey. A sudden storm approached from the west, dark clouds rolling across the hills, lightning flickering faintly before rumbling thunder followed. Villagers quickly secured livestock, covered goods, and prepared communal shelters. The wanderer found temporary refuge under a large oak, observing the efficiency and coordination of the people, the rapid response to natural events, and the subtle hierarchies in who took responsibility for different tasks. Such occurrences offered practical lessons in survival and reinforced the interconnectedness of human action and environmental awareness. Evening brought the traveler to a small town nestled in a valley, where cobblestone streets wound between timber-framed houses and small workshops. The town was alive with activity. Merchants closing stalls, children racing each other along narrow alleys, elders recounting stories on benches, and the faint clatter of blacksmiths finishing work for the day. The wanderer noted the interactions, gestures, tones, and the ebb and flow of energy, as each resident moved through daily life, understanding how communal rhythm maintained social stability, economic balance, and cultural identity. Nightfall transformed the town into a world of subtle light and shadow. Fires burned in hearths, Lanterns swung gently from posts, and distant dogs barked intermittently. Patrons gathered in inns and taverns, sharing news, recounting tales of unusual occurrences, or playing games that blended chance with skill. The wanderer observed and participated with care, mindful of cultural norms, social hierarchy, and the delicate balance between interaction and discretion. Stories ranged from pragmatic advice on road safety to fantastical accounts of strange creatures seen in nearby forests or mysterious travelers with magical items. These tales, whether factual or imaginative, enriched the understanding of human psychology, belief, and communal bonding. Even in sleep, the traveler absorbed the environment. Dreams interwove the scents, sights, and sounds of the day. The soft glow of firelight, the smell of roasted grain, the laughter of children, the distant toll of bells, and the persistent hum of movement along roads and alleys. Awareness of patterns, observation of behavior, and integration of subtle cues continued subconsciously, preparing the wanderer for the challenges, discoveries, and encounters of the next day. Life on the road was never separate from understanding, reflection, or anticipation. Each moment, each pause, each observation contributed to a continuous process of learning and adaptation, ensuring survival, insight, and a deepened appreciation of the Empire's vast, intricate fabric.